I need to get this out because my younger brother spent almost a year acting like he had won some filthy little war against me. Like marrying my ex-wife proved he was stronger, smarter, more wanted, and more deserving of the life I had built before she burned it down. But then he found out that he had not stolen a wife from me at all, because he had married a woman who was already married to 5 other men, pregnant by someone nobody could identify, and living so many different lives at once that even her lies needed a calendar. My name is Owen, my brother's name is Blake, and my ex-wife's name is Marissa, although by the end of this story, calling her by one name feels too generous, because Marissa used identities the way normal people use spare keys, changing them whenever one version of her got too dirty to keep alive. I was married to Marissa for 6 years, and if you had met her during the first year, you probably would have understood why I missed every warning sign, because she had this warm, wounded way of making you feel chosen, like she had survived a life full of betrayal, and somehow decided your boring apartment, your exhausted face, your cheap coffee machine, and your average little life were finally safe enough for her to rest. She told me she grew up with a cruel stepfather, a mother who vanished into addiction, an ex-fiancé who drained her savings, and a long trail of people who took advantage of her kindness. And because I was the kind of man who wanted to be useful more than I wanted to be suspicious, I mistook her endless emergencies for intimacy and her constant need for rescue as proof that she trusted me. Blake had always been the golden son, the one who made mistakes loudly and got forgiven quickly, while I became the dependable one, the one who fixed broken things, covered bills, remembered appointments, drove people to airports, and stood in the background holding everyone else's consequences like a coat rack with a pulse. Marissa understood that family dynamic before I did, and once she realized Blake needed to beat me more than he needed to understand anything, she started feeding him the exact poison he wanted, little jokes about how I worked too much, little sighs about how she felt unseen, little moments where she made him feel like the only person who truly understood her while I was busy paying for the life she claimed made her miserable. By year 4, our marriage had become a slow financial bleed that I kept explaining away because love makes you stupid when it arrives dressed as responsibility, and Marissa always had some reason why she needed cash, why a card had to stay in her name, why a payment showed up twice, why a loan company called my phone, why a storage unit charged my account, and why I was cruel for turning every conversation into money when all she wanted was peace. When the divorce started, she became the abandoned wife before I even understood the marriage had ended, and she told my parents I had become emotionally cold, financially controlling, suspicious, and obsessed with proving she was lying, which is exactly the kind of accusation that works when the accused person is already exhausted, already angry, and already trying to explain 1,000 little details no one has patience to hear. Blake took her side immediately, acting like he was protecting a fragile woman from his unstable older brother, even though, I later learned, he had already been meeting her behind my back, driving her to appointments that did not exist, and promising her that if she ever left me, he would make sure the family still treated her like one of them. The divorce cost me more than money, because Marissa took half the savings, pushed for the house, walked away with furniture my grandmother had given me, and somehow left with my parents apologizing to her for the pain she suffered while betraying me with their favorite son. For 8 months after the divorce, I became the family cautionary tale, the bitter man who could not accept that his wife left, while Blake became the brave brother who supported a wounded woman through healing, which is funny in the darkest possible way, because his version of support included sleeping with her, paying her bills, and helping her rewrite the timeline until everyone acted like their relationship bloomed after the divorce instead of crawling under my marriage like mold. Then my mother called me one evening and told me Blake and Marissa were getting married, and when your own brother marries the woman who gutted your life, your brain does not give you some dramatic speech. It gives you silence, nausea, and one weird physical detail to hold on to, which in my case was the sound of my washing machine thumping off balance in the next room while my mother explained that healing sometimes takes unexpected forms. Marissa sent the invitation through my mother because she was always smart enough to make cruelty look indirect, and the note said she hoped I could find peace as the family moved forward, which was the kind of sentence that made me realize she did not just want my brother. She wanted the satisfaction of seeing me sit in the audience while she wore white, and my parents called it grace. Marissa looked perfect in the way professional liars often look perfect when they know everyone is watching, and during the reception she gave me this tiny private smile, so small nobody else would notice it, but clear enough to say she knew exactly what she had taken and exactly how powerless everyone believed I was. 2 months after their wedding, my mother called again, but this time her voice had that bright, trembling happiness people use when they are trying to turn a disaster into a blessing before anyone names it correctly. And she told me Marissa was pregnant. Blake was overjoyed at first, at least according to the family group chat I had muted but not left, and he posted pictures of tiny shoes, ultrasound frames, and captions about becoming the man he was always meant to be, while Marissa wrote soft paragraphs about motherhood saving her from years of darkness, which was impressive considering she had caused most of the darkness personally and then rented it back to people as trauma. Then the first crack appeared when a certified letter arrived at my old business address for Marissa under a name I had never seen before, Marissa Vale, and because the courier needed a signature from someone authorized, my office manager called me before rejecting it, which means I did not open the letter or steal anything, but I did see the sender printed on the envelope, a county clerk's office from Nevada, along with a case number that made my attorney go silent for several seconds. That should have been impossible, because I had been married to Marissa for 6 years, Blake had just married her, and unless marriage law had quietly turned into a loyalty rewards program, one woman was not supposed to keep stacking husbands like coupons. My attorney told me not to contact anyone, not to post anything, not to accuse anyone in writing, and not to warn Blake until we understood what we were looking at, because if Marissa had created one legal mess, she had probably created more, and people like her do not run one scam when 5 scams can pay rent in 5 cities. A private investigator found the second husband in Arizona, a retired contractor named Glenn, who believed Marissa worked as a traveling patient advocate, the third husband in Ohio, a dentist named Patrick, who thought she spent half the month caring for a dying aunt, the fourth husband in Georgia, a warehouse owner named Luis, who had helped her open credit lines for a fake nonprofit, and the fifth husband in Florida, a widower named Raymond, who married her after she told him her first husband had died in a boating accident, which was interesting because at that point I was very much alive. Every one of them had a version of Marissa. Every one of them had a slightly different last name, a different tragedy, a different travel schedule, and a different bank account connected to emergencies that never ended, while Blake, my smug little brother who thought he had stolen the final version of her, was just the newest fool at the end of a conveyor belt of men she had trained to feel special while reaching for their wallets. Then the pregnancy stopped being a family announcement and became a legal grenade because the investigator found hotel records, clinic receipts, overlapping travel dates, private messages, and calendar entries that placed Marissa with different men across the same stretch of weeks when she would have conceived, and the most disgusting part was that she had told at least 3 of them she might be carrying their baby while telling Blake the child was proof that their love had been blessed. Thomas had paid for prenatal vitamins and a private doctor visit in Nevada. Glenn had sent money for what she called a high-risk pregnancy consultation in Arizona. Patrick had paid a medical bill in Ohio because she told him stress could hurt the baby. Louise had covered travel because she claimed she needed to see a specialist, and Raymond had cried on the phone with the investigator because Marissa had told him this child might be his second chance at fatherhood. And Blake, my brother, had painted a nursery. The investigator found one more thing that made my attorney curse under her breath. A spreadsheet backed up to an old cloud account where Marissa had not used names, only categories, which somehow made the whole thing more disgusting because I was listed as starter home, Blake was listed as family cover, Thomas was cash bridge, Glenn was property, Patrick was medical money, Luis was credit line, Raymond was insurance, and the pregnancy was labeled anchor. I read that word until it stopped looking like language because it was not baby, not child, not son, not daughter, just anchor. And when you see a pregnancy reduced to a strategy in a planning document, Something clean breaks in you because you understand that the person you loved was not just selfish. She was building a machine out of human trust. The bad news was that Blake and my parents were still under Marissa's spell, and if we warned them too early, she could run, destroy evidence, drain whatever she had already touched, and turn the pregnancy into another story where I looked obsessed with harassing a vulnerable mother. 3 months after their wedding, my parents planned a family dinner that was basically a soft baby celebration with little blue and yellow decorations, folded napkins, a cake with baby Blake, written on top like the question mark was cute instead of accidentally honest, and a living room full of relatives ready to bless a situation nobody had bothered to understand. I walked into that house with a folder under my arm and a lawyer-approved file on my laptop while Marissa sat on the couch with one hand on her stomach and the other hand in my mother's, looking like a saint in maternity clothes, while Blake hovered near her like a man guarding a trophy he had not realized was stolen from 6 different shelves. My father asked me to be respectful because stress was bad for the baby, and that sentence almost made me laugh because everyone in that room had spent months protecting Marissa from stress, while she turned stress into invoices and paternity confusion across half the country. I waited until my mother started talking about family healing, forgiveness, and how the baby deserved a clean start, because that was always how my family worked. They wanted the innocent person to swallow the truth so the guilty person could enjoy a peaceful table. I did not shout because shouting would have helped Marissa, and I did not insult her because insults would have given everyone permission to focus on my tone instead of her signatures. So I told Blake there were documents he needed to see before he gave his name, his money, and his future to a story Marissa had already sold to other men. Blake laughed first, of course, because men like Blake laugh when they feel the ground moving, but do not want anyone to notice. And he told me this was exactly why nobody wanted me around, always bitter, always dramatic, always trying to punish happiness. I opened the folder and put the first marriage certificate on the table, Marissa and Thomas Klein in Nevada, then the second with Glenn Mercer in Arizona, then the third under the name Marcy Rowe with Patrick Ellison in Ohio, then the fourth with Luis Ortega in Georgia, then the fifth with Raymond Shaw in Florida, and then Blake and Marissa's certificate sitting on top of the pile like the dumbest receipt in American history. My mother looked at the papers and then looked at Marissa, waiting for the graceful explanation that would make the impossible documents turn into a misunderstanding. But Marissa did not cry immediately, and that delay told me everything because she was not hurt. She was calculating which dead relative, abusive ex, forged identity, or clerical error would cost the least to invent. Then my attorney's investigator joined the video call from my laptop, and one by one the other husbands appeared, Thomas from Nevada looking furious in a quiet way, Glenn from Arizona still wearing a work shirt with paint on it, Patrick from Ohio sitting in what looked like a dental office, Luis from Georgia with his jaw tight and eyes dead, and Raymond from Florida looking older, pale, and embarrassed in a way that hurt to watch, because you could tell Marissa had not just taken money from him. She had crawled into the grief left by his dead wife and made herself comfortable there. Thomas had paid for a condo she claimed would become their retirement place. Glenn had put her on a property deed. Patrick had paid medical bills. Luis had opened credit lines. Raymond had changed insurance paperwork. And Blake had married her in front of my family because he wanted to prove he could take something from me and make everyone clap. Then the investigator explained the timeline, and he did not say anything graphic because he did not need to, but he showed travel dates, hotel receipts, clinic records, bank transfers, and messages that made the room understand the pregnancy was not a miracle wrapped in uncertainty, but a consequence of 5 overlapping relationships Marissa had kept alive, while telling each man he was the only future she had. Blake's face changed when he realized he could not even claim the baby as the one piece of the story that belonged to him, because the dates did not protect him, the messages did not protect him, and Marissa's own calendar turned fatherhood into a multiple-choice question with no clean answer. My mother started crying when Raymond explained that Marissa had told him the baby might be his, because that was when my mother finally understood this was not one affair, not one mistake, not one messy woman trying to survive, but a predator using men, grief, sex, money, and motherhood itself as tools in the same rotten kit. Blake asked Marissa how much of it was real, and that was the only direct sentence from him I remember because his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it, like the golden sun had finally become a child standing in front of something too ugly for charm. Marissa looked at him, then at the documents, then at the laptop full of husbands, then at my parents, then down at her own stomach, and for one insane second I thought she might actually tell the truth. Instead, she chose the wildest possible lie, saying she had married all of them for protection because men kept hurting her, and that the baby was a blessing no one had the right to question. That sentence almost impressed me because it takes a special kind of rotten confidence to stand in front of 6 marriage certificates, 5 possible fathers, a spreadsheet that labels your pregnancy as anchor, and still call yourself a victim. Then, Patrick said she had used the same panic story with him that she used with me. Thomas said she had claimed stress could harm the baby after he questioned a missing transfer, and Raymond said she had promised him he might finally be a father again. And suddenly the room turned colder because everyone understood that Marissa had not just lied about love. She had turned a child into a hostage before the child even had a name. My father sat down slowly. My mother covered her face, and Blake took off his wedding ring and put it on the coffee table. But even that looked pathetic because 5 other men had already done some version of the same gesture, and his dramatic heartbreak had arrived late to a very crowded room. The aftermath moved fast because once the other husbands had documents, attorneys, and matching stories, Marissa's web stopped looking like a family scandal and started looking like a pattern of fraud that crossed enough state lines to make everyone suddenly careful about what they said on the phone. Blake moved out within a week, although technically I do not know if moved out counts when half the furniture was bought with money from a dentist in Ohio and the security deposit came from a retired contractor in Arizona. Marissa tried to disappear, but disappearing becomes harder when you have 5 husbands, 1 ex-husband, 1 humiliated brother, multiple attorneys, public records, financial trails, a pregnancy with disputed paternity, and a private investigator who clearly enjoyed his job more than any healthy person should. The legal process took months, and I will not pretend I understood every part, because once bigamy, fraud, credit lines, insurance paperwork, divorce settlements, and paternity questions entered the same room, the whole situation became a swamp of court dates and filings, but the important part is that Marissa lost control of the story, and that was the first real punishment she ever understood. She could not cry her way out because too many men had the same tears saved in different states. She could not call me obsessed because Thomas, Glenn, Patrick, Luis, and Raymond had never met me before. She could not call Blake her true love because the timeline had already turned him into one option among several. And she could not call the baby proof of love because the records made it clear nobody knew whose child it was. My own case changed too, because my attorney reopened parts of the divorce settlement after proving Marissa had hidden assets, used false statements, and may not have been legally free to marry me in the first place, which created a strange kind of grief because getting money back felt good. But realizing your marriage may have been invalid from the start makes your memories feel like someone broke into them. Blake tried to apologize to me 3 times, and each attempt sounded worse than the last because he kept framing himself as another victim, which was technically true in the narrowest possible way, but also useless because he had helped her bury me before she buried him. He said she manipulated him. He said she made him feel seen. He said he thought I had failed her. And he said he never meant for the family to turn against me, but I told him that being stupid after being cruel does not make you innocent. And that was the most generous sentence I had left. My parents tried to rebuild things too, but families love the word rebuild because it sounds cleaner than admitting someone has to stand in the rubble and name who planted the bomb, and I was not ready to give them the comfort of pretending we had all been equally fooled. As for Marissa, she became one of those people who vanish in pieces before they vanish completely, first deleting wedding photos, then changing usernames, then shutting down accounts, then letting one attorney speak for her, then appearing in court looking smaller than she ever looked in my memories, not because she had changed, but because the audience had. The baby became the part nobody knew how to talk about, because even after everything, there was still a child coming into the world with a mother who had used pregnancy like a lockpick, and 5 men plus Blake all trapped in a legal and emotional mess where biology, money, pride, and shame had to be sorted under fluorescent lights by people with clipboards. I do not know how that child will understand this story one day, and that is the only part of it that still makes me feel something close to sadness instead of anger, because none of this was the baby's fault. And yet, Marissa had already turned that life into a battlefield before the first breath. The last time I saw Blake in person, he looked 10 years older and kept staring at his left hand like the missing ring still weighed something. And I almost felt sorry for him until I remembered the wedding toast, the smug smile, and the way he stood beside Marissa while my family treated me like a stain they had politely decided not to mention. He did not lose a wife. He lost a fantasy where he was better than me. People ask me if I feel vindicated, and I guess I do in the technical sense, because the documents proved I was not paranoid. The other husbands proved I was not bitter. The spreadsheet proved Blake was not special, and the paternity timeline proved Marissa had built her life out of stolen trust and weaponized intimacy. Still, when I think about Blake standing in my parents' living room, staring at 5 other marriage certificates while 5 other husbands stared back at him from a laptop screen, and while the woman he married sat there pregnant with a child, nobody could connect to one man without a test. I understand the kind of justice life occasionally creates when human stupidity, arrogance, and shamelessness get trapped in the same room. My brother married my ex-wife because he wanted to prove he could take what was mine. Then he found out she already belonged, legally, financially, and emotionally, to 5 other men who had all been told they were the only one. And the most brutal part was not that Marissa lied to him, because she lied to everyone, but that Blake finally understood he had not beaten me. He had joined the line, and even the baby he thought would make him a father might have been just one more trap she set before anyone knew where the truth ended.